Today, we are ranking from worst to best all 13 Star Wars TV shows, which span 20 years, from 2003 in the Clone Wars 2D series to Ahsoka, which just finished a couple weeks ago. Some of these are super iconic, and others are, well, you'll see. Number 13, Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures. Starting off with a banger, this show is absolutely peak Star Wars, except for the side characters, the plot, the visuals, the main characters, the dialogue, and most importantly, the art style. So in conclusion, it's completely garbage. But obviously, it's a kid's show, so it's not geared towards older fans. But if I had a kid, I wouldn't even let them watch this show. That's how bad it is. This is complete and utter garbage, which leads us straight into the next one. Number 12, Star Wars Resistance. I don't even understand why this is a show, and that's why it's so low on the list. For all the 8 people that watch this, what are you doing? I mean, look at the animation. It looked like a 2-year-old made this. I mean, what is this? It hurts my eyes to watch. Get this off my screen. Number 11, Star Wars Visions. I know this is probably pretty controversial, but I think it's just not better than the rest of these shows. It's not close to as bad as the first two, but not good enough to make it any higher. I know there are people that love this show, and they were excited for its second season, but to be honest, I couldn't have cared less. I watched most of the episode, I just was never into it. I don't know why, maybe it's because of the animation style. And speaking of weird animation style, number 10, Star Wars The Clone Wars 2D micro series. I got you there for a second, didn't I? But for real, this show isn't great. It has some cool moments like Anakin vs. Ventress and Kit Fisto fighting in the water. And Grievous is actually pretty cool and extremely menacing, and goes to work on some Jedi. That was really fun to watch. But really, the dialogue is lacking in a lot of scenes, and the animation really holds it back. Obi-Wan has some cool dialogue, and so does Yoda, but it's just not my cup of Boba tea. Speaking of Boba, number 9, The Book of Boba Fett. First things first, who calls this The Book of Boba Fett? Most people just call it the Boba Fett show, but secondly, it's not good. I mean, the only reason it's above Visions is because the main character. I mean, like Boba Fett, Cad Bane, Grogu, and the Mandalorian are all pretty good at least. But when the best episodes weren't even about Boba, that explains how mid it is. Honestly, it had some cool moments like Boba being trained by the Tuskens and Boba taming the Rancor and riding it. It was just so cool, but the rest of it was just trash. It's a show with some high highs but a ton of low lows, which leads me right into the next one. Number 8, the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Like I said, this show had some really cool moments, but also had a lot of really bad ones. This show kind of felt like a kid's show. It had some bad writing decisions, a lot of characters were lacking, especially Reva, and even though the Grand Inquisitor is a great character, in this show, I didn't like him very much. The only reason this show was any good is because the scenes with Vader in his castle and the Vader fighting Obi-Wan, especially in the finale, which in my opinion is one of the greatest duels in Star Wars history. Which reminds me, comment down below if you want to see me rank my top 10 lightsaber duels of all time. Number 7, The Bad Batch. I know that this probably makes some of y'all pretty angry, but before you go down to the comments and say, this ranking stinks, Bad Batch should be way higher. First, let me say, if I was ranking this before Season 2, it would be a lot higher, but I didn't like Season 2 at all. I felt like it was just not great. Maybe I had too high of expectations for it, but it honestly was kind of hard to watch. Like, I didn't even watch the last couple episodes until a month after they released, because the rest of the series was just not very good. But it's higher than Kenobi because of its 2-part finale. I really liked the ending, and I thought it was done really well, but the rest of the season just moved really slow. It felt like 12 filler episodes with 4 good ones. Don't get me wrong, those 4 were hype, but the others, I'd rather sleep in a tauntaun than have to watch those again. But seriously, the show isn't bad at all, besides what the name implies. That's why it's above almost half the other shows, but there's no way I could put it above the next 6. Speaking of number 6, the Ahsoka series. Honestly, I don't know what y'all think about this rating of Ahsoka. Some might think it's way higher or lower, but in my opinion, I like it a lot more than the other shows mentioned. It has some really good moments, like the World Between Worlds with Anakin. It's amazing going back to the Clone Wars and seeing the Battle of Mandalore. And then their dialogue wasn't something I definitely wanted to see in this show. But most of the other episodes were mid, and the finale wasn't even close to as good as the Anakin episodes. I do recognize this is kind of set up to be the trailer for the Mandoverse movie, but I still think it could have been better. But the Anakin episodes were peak Star Wars, so in conclusion, it's a good show, but compared to the top 5, there's no way it could be higher than number 6. And before I get to the top 5, I just want to say thank y'all so much for 2,000 subscribers, for the immense support. I'm going nowhere, this is just the beginning, and a very good one it is. I am very grateful for all of y'all. Thank y'all, and if you want to help out, please consider liking the video. It's a great help to me and would be greatly appreciated. And with all that out of the way, now to the top 5. At number 5, The Mandalorian. Yes, you heard me correctly. And if you weren't already mad at my list, this top 5 is going to infuriate you. At least I think so. The Mandalorian starts out amazing, with us getting introduced to a Mandalorian that became a bounty hunter. In the first episode, we see his normal life, and how he is a gifted fighter. But in the second episode, while trying to complete a bounty, he discovers that it is a baby alien, and that is commonly referred to now as Baby Yoda, and we figure out later that his name is Grogu. But after he finds him, he goes on a ton of missions saving him and completing bounties. But this is not a summary of every Star Wars show, this is a ranking. So the reason it's placed at number 5 is because of the first and second season being so good, but it's not higher because of the third season. The villains in the show are not great, and it's only pretty much Moff Gideon most of the time, and he is no Darth Vader, or even someone like the Grand Inquisitor. He's a Sith wannabe, but the heroes are immaculate, the Mandalorian especially, and the storytelling is also really special, and it's also a Star Wars Midwestern, and who wouldn't love that? And one of the best lines of all time is,
"This is the way."
It is such a great line and gives me chills. But I guess I'm a sucker for animated shows, because at number 4, The Tales of the Jedi. What a great series this is. Being able to see more into Dooku's life before the dark side and seeing him train Qui-Gon is just so cool. The Ahsoka episodes were good, but the Dooku's episodes were peak. I know this pick might seem strange because of how short the season is and the episodes are, but they are just so jam-packed with amazing writing, great storytelling, and perfect characters. I think the part where Anakin teaches Ahsoka to defend herself against the clones and then ends up using that exact move with Order 66 is just so cool. And the best scene of the series, but the rest of the Ahsoka episodes were good, don't get me wrong, but not amazing. Like the Dooku episodes, us in real time actually getting to see his turn to the dark side and Yaddle's canon demise was great for the lore of Star Wars, because we had wondered exactly how he got rid of Kamino, and how he felt about Qui-Gon Sith, and wondered what actually happened to Yaddle. I really hope they make a season 2 of this, or do Tales of the Sith, or maybe even Tales of Darth Vader. I bet there's a lot of stories that could be told of a lot of specific characters. There's a lot of amazing things about this season, but the main thing holding it back is the length of the series. Maybe if they come up with more, you'll see this higher on my list, but for now, it has to be placed right outside the top 3. And at number 3, Star Wars Rebels. To be honest, when I first created my list for this video, I had Rebels at the 4th spot and Tales of the Jedi here. And before I tell you this, I have watched some videos on Rebels before this, because I know this might actually surprise you, but I've never actually watched Rebels in its entirety before. I know, but I have watched most of the main episodes, but only a couple, because I couldn't get past the first and second episodes. Now, since I decided to stick with it and watched it, I finally finished the first season, and I'm almost done with the second. And I've loved it so much that I think it's the 3rd best show that Star Wars has to offer. Ezra at the beginning of Rebels is kind of like Ahsoka at the beginning of the Clone Wars, just kind of annoying and kiddish. But as the season progresses, and in the second season, he gets a lot better, and so does the rest of Ghost Team. Also, one thing that is really funny is after a couple minutes into each episode, the Star Wars Rebels logo pops up for a few seconds. But when that happens, it sometimes happens at the most hilarious times. Like when Ezra was falling off the ship and is screaming when the screen just appears. I was laughing so hard. With not having watched Rebels before, Kanan is becoming one of my favorite characters, as well as Ezra. But I also have a new liking toward the Grand Inquisitor, who I think is really cool. And from my only experience with him before Rebels being Kenobi, he is a way better character in this show than he is in his live action appearance. And speaking of live action, at number 2, Andor. This is probably my most controversial pick. Some people say it doesn't feel like Star Wars because it doesn't have the big characters and the lightsabers, but I don't care for that if we have a show with cinematography and the writing that this one does. It captured me in, and I couldn't wait for the next episode to come out each week. I would watch it as soon as I could, or sometimes right as it came out. I was so excited to watch it. Maybe it's ranked so high because I loved Rogue One so much, but I don't know. Sure, the whole thing isn't perfect. It's more than you can wish for a Disney show, or any show in general. My favorite parts were in the prison. I felt like all that was just done so well, but the Imperial base that they took over on Aldhani at the end was also an amazing episode. And the scene when it looks into the sky and you see the Eye of Aldhani was just so stunning. I feel like they did Andor perfectly to his counterpart in Rogue One. turning him into a rebel leader and his mom being so instrumental was really good. And another show that I want to see another season of. Luckily, we're going to get one sometime next year. What y'all have been waiting for. At number 1, The Clone Wars. If you expected anything other than Clone Wars to be first, you are just not a diehard Star Wars fan, or you are too much of one. But either way, you have to say that this show is one of the best Star Wars shows, because the characters are amazing, like Anakin, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, Dooku, and Maul, just to name a few. All got crazy character development, making their characters so much better in my opinion. Mainly with Anakin, Ahsoka, and Maul, because we see the slow fall of Anakin to the dark side, as well as the creation of Ahsoka and her whole arc being really good. And Maul, not just being the cold, heartless killer he was in The Phantom Menace, but Maul also became so consumed with his hatred that he came back from the dead. And that story was so good. Take notes, Disney. And I like the characters we barely saw in the movies, or never saw in the movies, like Cad Bane, Plo Koon, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Pong Krell. Speaking of Pong Krell, the Umbara arc was amazing. We also get to see some god-type characters, being like the father, brother, and daughter, and the Wills. It's such a great show. And speaking of great things, tell me in the comments if you want me to rank all 12 Star Wars movies next. And as always, thanks for watching, and have a great day.